Support for Consider This is provided by the University of Nebraska at Omaha College of Communication, Fine Arts, and Media.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
So when you were growing up in Washington, you were already a business person.
Well, I thought so. I didn't get a lot of public recognition as such, but
So you were making money, and as I understand it, you filed your first tax return when you were 14 years old?
yeah, it was for the year when I was 13, and 13. I filed it when I was 14. Yeah.
Okay. And did you think the tax rates were too high then, or not?
It hurt more in those days. I did deduct my bicycle and my watch as business expenses, and only because the statute of limitations is applied. I took them entirely. Apparently, I never used my bicycle for pleasure or my watch. I never looked at my watch except when I was delivering papers.
So after you
humble beginnings for one of the richest and most respected businessmen in the world. Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, the Oracle's Fables, Life Lessons for Children. Joining us to talk more about it are longtime Omaha journalist and the book's author, John Prescott. Seated next to him is artist and book's illustrator, Tom Kerr. Welcome to the two of you. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having us, Kathy. It's really a pleasure. It's kind of like a press club reunion here, isn't it?
It is kind
we
of,
all work on the
isn't
press
it?
club show together, and
We do.
Kathy tried to teach me how to dance, and it just didn't work.
Not as well as it did with Tom.
Tom is more talented than I am. This is why I did.
That's very generous of you to start the interview off with.
I'm going to be in 42nd Street next week.
Oh, yeah?
I've got some steps.
I thought you were going to be on 42nd Street next week. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right.
Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here, Kathy, with old friends. So it's
Thank
very
you.
nice.
I want to start with you. If Warren Buffett were here with us, John, how would you introduce him to us?
A guy who's got a lot of common sense in a world where common sense is anything but common. And he's a very funny guy. As we all know, he's been in the press club show with us, which is kind of the genesis of what started this ball rolling. I've written things for him, and he has taken them, and he said, "No, I think I can do a better job writing it myself." We all recall probably the time when one of his early shows when he was in the show, and Jim Fogarty was having the cast party at his house afterwards, and he said, invited Warren to the cast party and told him the address, says, "Wait a minute, let me get something to write it down with." And Warren turned to Jim and said, "No, that's okay, I'm pretty good with numbers." So there you go.
There you go.
But
now, do you remember your first meeting with Mr. Buffett?
it was probably during a press club show. He never turned us down. He was always willing to do a shtick with us. He's sung songs. He's the last time that we had him in the show, that was my last show actually, 2012, when he bought the World Herald, and the whole show was kind of based around the story of Warren Buffett buying the World Herald. And he ends up coming out and throwing newspapers into the audience, folding them the same way. He never forgot how to fold a newspaper. So, I mean, that's kind of a person he always struck me as being. And although I have to say that I'm mostly inclined not to call him Warren, it seems like it's got to be Mr. Buffett, even though my hair is as white as his now.
You know, I got called up into his office a few years back. I'd done an illustration for the World Herald that he particularly enjoyed, and I got a telephone call from, it was Debbie Bosanic, who said, Mr. Buffett really, really likes that illustration and wanted to know if he could get the original. And I said, of course, I'll have it couriered over. And he said, oh, would you come over with it? And I said, okay, but you know, they won't let you up. So I thought, okay, I'll take it to the Kiewit Plaza. I was invited up, and I met Warren in his office, and we chatted about my background and his background, and we talked about some political issues, and he was charming. He was a lot of fun.
So chat with us about your background, Tom. Like, when did you become interested in drawing?
I was 3 years old. I remember my first drawing. I was drawing on the beach in Maine, and I was drawing with a reed, and I'd drawn a Bugs Bunny, and I was very, very proud of it. And I kept bugging my mom and dad about it and said, come on, you have to see my drawing. Well, of course, the tide had come in, so it was gone.
Yeah.
But that, I've always loved to draw as long as I can remember.
Well, so tell us from the bunny image,
bunny, right.
right? So how did things go from there? You're just 3. You continued that in school, and your teacher saw that there was definitely.
You know, my mom did. She helped me. She would look at some of my drawings and talk to me about shading and that sort of thing. And then I'd always kind of thought, well, you'll never be able to draw for a living, but enjoy it for the fun of it. And then I think the most important thing that I ever heard my father say was that he'd be disappointed if I didn't either use my music or my art in some way in my life, which to me was like, it's your get out of jail free card. I got, you know, mom and dad's blessing to pursue art, so I did.
So what ways have you, other than the book, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, but what ways have you utilized that talent then, Tom? Tell us give us some examples.
Well, in Omaha, you see the O logo. That's mine. The people that know McGruff the Crime Dog would know, well, they know McGruff. I drew the character for about 10 years. Did a lot of coloring books and that sort of thing for them. Those are 2 really notable things, but I spent a lot of years with the World Herald, so anybody who enjoyed the illustrations there would know my work.
Okay.
He did pick up a mean Australian accent when he was the editorial cartoonist for the Melbourne Sun. And
Too right.
Yeah, exactly right. He knows all the idioms too.
He's a beauty.
But so he's been, as he says, he's been everywhere from Manhattan in New York to Manhattan, Kansas.
Yeah.
People buy his stuff. He's really a great artist.
And you're a great writer, John.
It's very kind.
Omaha journalist, right? So Warren Buffett, just one of the countless newsmakers with whom you visited, I'm sure, over the years. Talk about your life. Give us a little bit of a history of John Prescott.
Well, actually, my journalism career started, well, not counting the Joker newspaper I did at my grandfather's print shop, setting the type myself when I was a little kid. I was the editor of the Gateway here on the UNO campus in 1968 in this very building. I think I was in the office just a minute ago looking for the 78 cents I left in my desk, but they've completely rearranged and remodeled the place. It looks great.
Can't believe they didn't hold that for you, John.
I know that. I am too. Went for parking fines.
That's right.
But I got basically the UNO experience got me an internship at KMTV in 1968, and I worked at KMTV for 11 years. Then went to Hastings, Nebraska, was a news director there for a year. Came back to Channel 6, and then one of my old anchorman friends, Jeff Jordan, went to work for Union Pacific Railroad and said, "Gee, you're so happy in television news. Why don't you?" There's this great job opening up at the railroad. So I went to the railroad and I edited magazines and eventually did video at the railroad. And then when I left the railroad, retired from the railroad, a friend of mine knew of a job at Stratcom, a place I thought I'd never work, and I became the first civilian speechwriter for the commander of Stratcom. I was there at Stratcom in various capacities for 7 years. And I hung it all up in 2010 and until Jim Fogarty, who owns part owner of a local company that writes family histories, it's called Legacy Preservation, talked me into going in there, so I still keep my hand in writing family histories. And of course, during that whole period I was in television news, we were all doing press club shows, and years after that I did 40 of them. But all of us got to be friends on those press club shows, and that's where we met. That's where I met Warren Buffett. And I'm
going to interrupt.
That's where our friendship started 15 years ago.
Because John was giving you his kind of curriculum vitae. The bottom line with John is he's.
I love it when he talks fancy, though. And I'm the word guy.
He's about to say something nice about you, John.
Oh, okay. I'll be
quiet. He's incredibly versatile. He can write anything. You know, that's one of the reasons we collaborated on this book together. He has the ability to write comedy, he can write speeches, he can write anything, and he does it with personality and flair and style that's unique to him. That's part of the reason this whole experience has been so much fun.
It is fun, but it comes from those press club things. And when you work together with folks who are all talented and all very creative, it kind of engenders more creativity. And you know, I write back at you, Tom. I mean, he's a great artist. You got to see his really serious stuff. He's done drawings for some of the editorial things we've done. But this, the stuff he has in this book is wonderful, and some of the things he has hanging on walls around the Midwest are just fantastic. Wow. Just really excellent art.
I want to ask, John, because you have done so much, and you are, as Tom said, multi-talented, right? What's your most memorable interview? Do you have one? You've talked to so many people. Is there one that really sticks out?
When Henry Fonda put up the money for the Emmy Gifford Theater, for some reason, when they had the original Emmy Gifford Theater, the old Center Theater, about 35th and Center Street, for some reason, I was the only reporter there, and I got to talk to Henry Fonda for about a half hour, and we shot the whole thing. It's, you know, a couple of 400-foot magazines, and that was very interesting. We talked about roles he'd played, and I was a big Fonda fan, as are most Omahans, I think. And it was, it just was, that probably stands out as being the most interesting afternoon I had in television news with an interview.
Wow, wow. Tom, what about your favorite illustration to date?
To date?
Yeah.
Boy, when, you know, I've cranked out thousands.
I would
and
think, yeah.
That's not the right word to use, but I've done a lot of drawing in my lifetime. You know, the most recent one that I did was after the Charlie Hebdo attack. I was really saddened by that. And I did a cartoon like 10 minutes after I heard about it that I drew Charlie Brown, because it was all about Charlie Brown. I had him with his head in his hands, crying on a bench in Paris, going, "Good grief." It was all about the grief, and I had a broken pencil, and I think a little blood in there as well. But that was, I think the best work I do is when I'm emotionally involved, and that was about as emotionally involved as you can get. That was a really upsetting day.
I would imagine countless stories that the two of you could tell just based on your experiences from the time you're 3, right?
Yeah.
To whenever you, how old were you, John, when you knew you wanted to be a writer?
It kind of, probably I was 8
Okay.
when and it was mostly, I was writing humor back then. And it was back in the day when my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Redding at Windsor School, sent home a note to my mother. It's on the report card. I still have the report card somewhere. "John sometimes displays an inappropriate sense of humor."
Huh.
And I kept that, and I said, "Wow, I'm getting through."
He still does.
This is selling. So, I don't know. Maybe it came the press club show, writing for the press club show, scratched that itch for a while. The Oracles book is something totally different. I'd done a little writing in that realm of children's stories, just for my own kids.
Yeah.
And yet this kind of stands as, you've heard the phrase geezing, as in old geezers geeze. This is kind of a permanent form of geezing that I can leave to my children, so they'll always be, "Oh, that's what he meant. Ah, there's the lesson there," something like that. So there's lots of reasons to do the kind of writing that I did for the book that we just produced.
When did it dawn on you that book was going to become a reality?
Well, about a year ago, Tom and I were having dinner with our wives, and it was Tom said, "You know, it seems that our next project might be kind of fun if we did fables based on Warren Buffett quotes." And he said, "You want to tackle some?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I think that could be fun." So actually, Tom went to Mr. Buffett with the idea, and he said, "Well, I'd like to see a few." So I wrote up 5 fables, and Tom illustrated them, and we showed them to him, and he told Tom, "Yeah, go ahead, go for it. You can sell it at the meeting next May." And we said, "Okay."
Wow.
And it was that, as simple or as complicated as that. And I spent the rest of the summer coming up with 14 fables total, and Tom spent the rest of the year illustrating them, and we had it printed, and it's will be at the Berkshire Hathaway meeting, this at the 2015 meeting.
Wow. Now, here's the cover.
Ah, yes.
So,
did you notice the gecko?
well, I want
Can you have all
to
of the
walk through
famous-
this cover. We have this up for our viewers, and so, you know, why don't the two of you? I'm going to have you working together here with a few more illustrations. But let's start with this one. Story behind this cover, you guys.
This was the proposed cover that I sent to Mr. Buffett. I've changed the typography and some of the details in it, but at that stage, John hadn't written all the fables. So you'll notice there's a tortoise and the hare in there. There's no tortoise and the hare in the actual story, but it still does speak to the fables, so I didn't feel we needed to change it. I did want to put the bear and the bull in because of the obvious economic ideas, but I did know that there was going to be a beaver. I did know there was going to be a mouse, and I love raccoons, so I put the raccoon in.
You know, Tom, as someone who has trouble with stick people, and I really do, when you look at an illustration like that, one of the questions I'm thinking about is where do you start? So you have what? You have the image in your mind.
Yeah.
Is there a certain place on the page that you start each time, or, I mean, how is it that you're able to really
If you
create that?
When you start to do an illustration, it obviously formulates in your mind, but then that's when your pencil gets to play on the paper too, and you let your mind and your hand just work in unison and work out different ideas on paper, and then, you know, I just work the pencil harder and harder and harder and use the eraser when you don't want to rip the paper.
Right.
But then I'll work out the design from that pencil work. And then when the pencil work's done and I'm happy with it, then I'll redraw it in pencil on real art paper and start painting.
It's said that we're our own worst critics, so I'm just trying to kind of place myself where you are when you start something like that.
Yeah.
How tough are you on yourself? I mean, how many times do you have to start over before, or is it just, does it vary based on the project?
It varies, and you know, sometimes it just happens immediately. There's something almost chemical that happens that it just is there, and other times you have to work and work and work to get it right to where you want it. And there's sometimes you just have to get up and walk away from it and come back the next day or in an hour or something just to freshen your mind. So it's whatever happens.
Well, it's a gift in my book. So let's go to another illustration. We have three, gentlemen. So what I'd like to do is just put these up one at a time for our viewers, and then you just tell us what's coming to mind here on the page.
Well, this one, before we started, I just reacted to that one. What John wrote is exceptionally strong. It's about a dog who was adopted by the farmer and had looked after the farm, looked after the property and the family, and one day he bites the farmer for no good reason, and the dog's got to go. And Warren's quote was something like, it takes a lifetime to build up a reputation, but can be ruined in 5 minutes, something to that. I happen to be working with a guy who is very talented and was doing a lousy job in terms of customer service, and I wound up sending him the fable just to say, you're really talented, you're really good, I really like you, but your business life in Omaha is going to be very unsuccessful if you don't look after this aspect. It's biting the hand.
John?
I can't add anything to that. It sums it up pretty well. And we've all been, you know, it's an experience that we all can face. A lifetime, we see it every day in the news where somebody who we respect has done something either in their past or in the present that is totally out of character, and nobody expects it, and then you totally think different about that person from then on because of that. And
does Brian Williams' name pop into your mind?
Actually, the fable was written before the Brian Williams. We all feel terrible about the Brian Williams thing, but I don't think we're going to ever see him on NBC again. Just one fan's opinion.
All right, well, I'm just going back to the interview here then. So,
Sorry.
no, that's all right. We asked Tom about the illustrations. I want to ask you about the quotes. First of all, with all the things that Warren Buffett has said, how on earth do you pull out of that what you want to communicate? Or it's kind of your starting point for the basis of a book like this.
That's a good question, because that was the toughest part, because there's all these great quotes, and what are we going to do with the fables? So I started a winnowing process and started thinking of the quotes in terms of fables. How can I illustrate this not only simply, but in a way that might cause a conversation between, say, a grandparent who buys the book for a younger child and they discuss it. One of the photos you selected, I'll talk about that a little more, go in a little more depth, because that's a classic of what I'm talking about. But it was tough. And we came up with the ones we thought that represented his basic philosophy the best. And were also life lessons for kids. Things like not only where you invest your money, but where do you invest your time? If you're a kid, or especially a teenager, are you investing your time with people, with friends who are going to help you build the kind of life you want, or are you going to invest your time with folks who maybe won't be as supportive to what your goals are in life? Mm-hmm. It's things like that, the conversation that these will engender, hopefully. That was what I was thinking about when I was putting the two together.
Wow, let's look at our second illustration then, and you guys walk us through this one.
This is the story of the three fish when you only can see two fish. And both the medium-sized fish there and the big fish are all catching little tiny fish. And the medium-sized fish tells the big fish, listen, why don't you go someplace else, and you can catch medium-sized fish, and I'll take care of all the smaller fish. And the bigger fish says, that sounds like a great idea, and eats the middle-sized fish. Mayhem everywhere on these stories. So, and the moral there is just simple: don't be too greedy. Be careful what you wish for. There's a lot of elements that you can talk about when you're talking about that kind of a situation.
Interesting. Tom, anything you want to add to that particular?
Actually going back to the other story John was telling that has great meaning for me is that when he was telling me the story about picking your friends, I thought, I wish this book had been done 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when our kids were teenagers. There's so many life lessons that were important, and kids make choices, but one of the things we really would have loved to have been able to do is talk about pick your friends and pick your experiences carefully.
Well, just opening the dialogue in general.
Yeah.
So important and so difficult for families to do. So when you have a prompt and cue sitting right there on your lap, right, that just makes it so much more feasible, bearable, easier, that kind of thing. So all right, let's take a look at our third and final illustration here. Go ahead, gentlemen.
I love doing that drawing.
Yeah. Well, this is a good example of how the illustration and the fable can engender some conversation. The story is about the groundhog he keeps digging the hole in the same place despite the fact that they're excavating to build a parking lot. And then they cover it over every night. He digs it out every night until they pave it. Mm-hmm. And the fable, or the Warren Buffett quote, is something about if you're spending all your time bailing water, it may be time to just change boats. And the idea here is, what are you spending your time on? Are you spending your time in a useful endeavor that's going to lead somewhere? Or are you doing the same thing over and over again, and in some endeavor that's not going to lead you or to any greater success or any greater satisfaction, and it's not going to produce anything of value? So why are you doing that? Maybe it's time to reevaluate and spend your time and your efforts doing something different.
What did you gentlemen learn by putting this book together that you didn't already know? I mean, this is written for kids, right? Open dialogue and all of that, but surely you learned something, right?
Well, we learned.
Or did you know it all?
We learned that we work together exceptionally well.
Yeah, that helps. Yeah, having somebody you can play off of and go back and forth, and it's true.
Yeah.
We've done a couple of projects together, and this one just went so smoothly. Just a pleasure to work with this gentleman. He's just a trooper and a great artist, and it's fun. And at my age, my tender age, I'm kind of in it for the adventure. So it's just been fun to do. If we sell a few books, that would be wonderful. If somebody writes to us and says, we used the book, it really was great, that would be even better. But I think learning is, as we say in the book, learning is a lifelong process, and we're still learning.
What did Mr. Buffett think about the book?
He's going to love it. He's going to be ecstatic. What we're doing is we're taking the best ideas that he has, and we're passing it along to the youngest generation. He's all about education. He's all about getting lessons out to kids, and this really encapsulates his philosophies and puts it into a book form, and opens an area where moms and dads and grandparents can talk.
And we certainly invite him to come down to his own bookstore at his own shareholders meeting and buy a copy. That would be wonderful.
We'll even buy him a Coke.
Yeah, we'll buy him a Coke too.
That would be
great.
very kind of you, two gentlemen. So you've had a few book signings in just the minute or so we have remaining. How's it going? What are people saying?
Surprisingly well. I mean, we expected 60 people at a little launch we had at Jocelyn Castle, and we sold more than 200 books, including one from a guy who was in town on business from Wisconsin, and bought 2 for his nieces in Wisconsin. So I told him, well, tell him the badger is for his nieces, the story on the badger.
Very nice, okay.
So feedback's been
Kind of a
great.
Big Ten thing.
If folks want more information, I'll put the website up. This is at least a starting point for them,
Correct.
right? If they want to, and we know they'll want to. We hope they do. You said it's a guaranteed read.
Oh, yeah.
So the Oracle's Fables, Life Lessons for Children. You can find that at oraclesfables.com.
Org or com?
We're .com, sorry.
.com.
Oh, is it
But
.com?
That's
Yeah.
our fault.
Did
That's
I
all right.
misspell it?
You know what, that's
We
okay,
may have
.com.
it.
We've
It's
corrected it.
www.oraclesfables, one word, .com.
Yeah.
And you'll
Always.
find everything you need to know if you want a copy of the book.
Always the editor. All right,
Oh,
so
thank you.
gentlemen,
goodness.
Thank you, man.
thank you very, very much for being here. Best wishes with this book and all the projects that you have ahead of you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us,
You
Kathy.
bet. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or email us at considerthis@tvmail.unomaha.edu.